Talking about dying is a taboo, and it is really important to do it. So how do we overcome that taboo, and how do we actually start that conversation? For a palliative care nurse like myself, I'm forced to do that. But everybody gets asked to talk about death and dying at some point in their life. We're all going to lose loved ones. We're all going to die ourselves. So we need to start that conversation, and we need to do that now. This is what Dying Matters Week is all about. And my main advice is ask each other questions. Allow it to happen naturally. What makes people unwell is really varied, and what makes people come to the end of their life is quite varied, and people of all ages and stages and different diseases. So we might be involved in sorting out their issues with pain or issues with feeling sick. But equally, we might be involved in helping people think about how they want to spend their last days, weeks, months, and where they would like to spend it and with who. I think people have been forced to open up about the topic of death and dying with COVID. It's a highly infectious disease that is leading to people's death. So we've been forced to have that conversation, and it's not an easy conversation. And that's why something like Dying Matters becomes so important, because it could happen to any of us. It impacts me in lots of different ways. Often my work will impact me depending on who I meet. Maybe I have things in common with somebody, or I make a special connection with somebody, and then I have to reflect back on my own mortality when I'm meeting people who are facing the end of their life. It also makes me think a lot more deeply about my loved ones or people that I'm close to, and what impact their life has on mine as well. COVID has affected my role greatly in that often with patients at the end of their life and patients who are facing death and dying, we like to involve their loved ones. We like to involve even their pets if we can. We like to bring people around that person, have sensitive conversations, talk about their life and how they want to spend it, where they want to spend it, and in what way. Sometimes those conversations are quite intimate and personal, and they're very difficult to have when you've got lots of PPE and masks and gowns on. They need the personal touch. They need that connection, which is made a lot more difficult when you're mostly isolating from each other. I'm a Buddhist, and I've been a Buddhist for over 10 years now, and that tradition comes from the East, and they do have a very different sort of worldview and sort of view of life and death. Sort of traditionally in Buddhism, they talk about rebirth, but it's easy to get that notion a little bit wrong, rebirth, and to think that, well, here I am, I'll shed this body and then I'll take a new one in the next life. But it's not really quite like that. It would be better to think of the actions and the mind that we generate in this life, and what we cultivate in this life has an ongoing effect beyond our life. But just exactly how that plays out, we never really know. It's a bit of a mystery. But it's important to think that what's happening now affects the future. So we have always had rebirth in Buddhism, but it's not. We've also had the doctrine of no self. So it's not exactly us. Everything is changing, even ourselves. There's no sort of fixed and separate self in Buddhism. So it's not a soul that goes from life to life. It's very mysterious. It's hard to pin down, but that's deliberate. It's deliberate in Buddhism. This is something that we didn't expect. This is something that we didn't want. This is something that we'd really like to go away, that makes all of us feel a bit uncomfortable. And then what happens when we feel uncomfortable is we tend to sort of revert back to how I do things and how I like things. And when we get a bit ruffled, we tend to want to take back control, don't we? And then if we're all doing that, it can make work and life, either work life, family life, any life, it can make it a little bit tense and a little bit tough and tight and restricted, and the lockdown plays into that as well. So just trying to, as best as we can, just to try and appreciate that I'm conditioned in a particular way. I am the way I am for a lot of reasons, and so are you. You're the way you are for a lot of different reasons as well. And just trying to, in this uncertainty, just try and appreciate that people are very different and coming from very different places, and what you feel is really, really important might be different to what somebody else feels is really, really important. The COVID situation is not over, actually. There's still a long way to go. I think of India at the moment, where the pandemic is the worst it's been globally. And I've got a lot of friends in India who are dying very young and in very large numbers, and it's impacting that whole country very severely at the moment. So I think we've got a long way to go with COVID and death and dying, and I think we're going to need to really learn and keep this conversation going.